Now let's talk about control structures, logic, loops, and all that kind of stuff. So the first kind of control structure we're going to deal with is an if statement. And every language has an if statement. We have a whole bunch of logical operators that we just got done talking about. Equals, the double equals is the question mark. Triple equals is the same as and same type as. Not equals, the not, and then the and the or. Double ampersand is and the double vertical bar is or. And so triple equals and exclamation double equals. And curly braces are the way that we talk about the begin and end of the blocks that are affected by the if statement. So other than that, we say if parenthesis answer equals 42. This is kind of the question that we're going to ask, and that's going to lead to a true or a false. If it's true, of course, the first block is going to execute, and then there's an else, and then if that result is false, the question is false, then the else section is going to execute. And there can be more than one line in here. I'm just showing one line to keep it small on the screen. So when this code all runs, it basically comes in, answers 42, then this is true, answer equals 42 is true, it runs console log hello world, then skips the else clause and is all done. So the output of this is indeed hello world. There's multi-way ifs, and you can hang them together just like with else ifs, just like in Python. And it does it in order. If this is false, if the first if is false, it checks the else if, and as soon as that's true, it runs that block of code and then hops out to the end. It doesn't check all of the if questions simultaneously. And you can optionally have an else clause so that if none of the else if clauses are true, then it just falls through and runs the code in the else block. You can have an indeterminate loop, a while loop that runs until something becomes true. It's a zero trip loop, which means that it runs a minimum of 0 times, which means it effectively functions the first time through like an if statement. So while fuel greater than 1, do this thing in the block, is really like an if fuel greater than run, if fuel is greater than 1, do this block. Although in this case, I've built myself an infinite loop because fuel starts out at 10, and I say, while fuel is greater than 1, console.log vroom, which means it's just going to do that forever. And that's because I didn't change the iteration variable, in this case fuel, and usually we construct these in a way that they terminate eventually. And so I've done a much better job in the second one where I set fuel to 10 and I say, while fuel is greater than 1, and inside the loop I console.log vroom, and then I subtract 1, and I go up and up and up and up, and then it's going to go, and then fuel will eventually get to 0, and then it will exit out the loop and finish. And so this here is an infinite loop, and this is a finite loop. While loops are always a little tricky because you've got to construct the iteration variable or make sure you know how to get out of the loop. There is what's called a one-trip loop. I haven't written a one-trip loop in 15 years. I'll just show it to you. It is the do loop. It's got a curly brace, and the idea is that the loop runs once until the check is done. And so it's like a do until it's do while it remains true, but it's going to run the loop at least once. So it's a one-trip loop. But I just don't write one-trip loops. I don't quite know. There might be a way to do it, but I don't know. The for loop is a counted loop, and it's going to run. And so there's 3 parts to it, and they're separated by semicolons. It looks really complex, but it's not. So you make an iteration variable. The first part up to the semicolon is the code that runs before the loop starts. So I'm going to set this variable count equals 1. The second part is like a while, and it's a top test 0 trip loop. And as long as count remains less than or equal to 6, then the body of the loop is going to execute. And then each time at the bottom of the loop, we're going to add 1. So this is going to go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When it's equal to 6, it's going to run the 6th time, but then it's going to come up and be 7, but then the loop is not going to run. And so that's what's called a counted loop, where we have some variable that's just running through a set of numbers. In Python, we would use range to do this kind of a thing. Now, like in Python, we've got the break statement, and the break statement just says, I'm going to get out of this loop. So if this line executes, it looks at if there's more than one loop, it's the innermost loop, and it just basically escapes the loop and moves on to the line of code that follows the loop immediately. Just if it's done, get out. Don't execute another line. It doesn't run the rest of the iteration. It just skips out of the loop completely. Continue is another very useful thing. You can basically say, I want to give up on this iteration and go back up and do the next iteration. But the thing is, this increment usually is this third part of the for loop. If you say continue, that actually runs. So it actually continue goes and does the plus plus, and then it does the check, and then it either continues to run back here, or it jumps out if count is now greater than 10. And so continue works pretty much the same in loops in JavaScript as it does in Python. So you can also loop through objects. And so here's an object that has three attributes, golf, tennis, and ping. And I can say for ball and balls, and then that means that this iteration variable is going to walk through the keys or the attributes. So it's going to be golf, ping, and tennis. And then I can use the lookup syntax to look up balls sub golf, balls sub tennis, and balls sub ping, and then print all those things out. So that's what's called a definite loop. That's looping through an object that we're going to see. Now, when you're looping through an array, which is a linear list, you actually use a counted loop, not a definite loop. But objects, which are like dictionaries, which are like associative arrays, we'll use definite loops to loop through them. So that is a quick romp through JavaScript. Not so much to get to the point where you can write a bunch of JavaScript, but so you can read it, and then when you get a syntax error, hopefully you can fix it.